Josei anime is the one demographic that no one really talks about, and that is probably also because no one really watches any of the anime from that demographic. And unfortunately, I'm no different. When trying to come up with this list, I realized that I haven't really watched that many shows either, especially when I've only seen about 10 anime that I would classify as Josei, and 7 of them being mid or worse. So this list contains my favorite Josei anime. However, these were here more so by obligation, but however, I do want to revisit this list in the future after I watch some more Josei anime. But for now, this is the list, so just sit back and watch as we rank the best Josei anime that I have seen. So the first anime on this list is an anime that I really liked, but it's not normally something I would put at the peak of a demographic, but it is on this list, and that is known as Nina of the Starry Bride. This is a really good show for quite a few reasons, the main one being the characters, but I'll leave that for last. First, let's talk about the story. It has a really cool and interesting premise. Nina is an orphan girl who is taken in by the palace to replace a dead princess who has similar features to her. She has to learn palace etiquette and she eventually is going to be married off. However, she ends up falling in love with the prince of her kingdom. Of course, she still ends up getting married anyway. But that is what makes the story so fun, because now we have a love triangle going on. All 3 of these characters are awesome and really compelling in their own way. I also really like the art style of this anime. It's not perfect, and it's definitely not as good as the manga, but it still looks pretty cool. It has been a while, so I don't really remember the animation quality, but I think it was pretty average, but not bad. But let's finally talk about the characters, beginning with Nina herself. She is a little rough around the edges, who's a little tomboy, who has a very hard time adjusting to palace life. However, she is also extremely kind and very smart. She can read people very well and she picks up on things quickly, plus she obviously has a lot of street smarts having survived in the environment for so long. She makes a really great main character because she can be so unpredictable, funny, and just all around great. So, Azure is the prince who Nina first meets. He is the one who brought her to the palace and the one who oversaw all of her learning. They didn't start off on the right foot, but over time they grew to care about each other a lot. He is someone who is very stoic, he doesn't really show his emotions all that much, which does really make him a really interesting character because it makes you want to learn more about him. Especially when we learn that the crown prince is half his age, if even that. That makes it even more interesting, as you would think that being the crown prince is the older brother. That involves a backstory reveal that I don't really want to spoil if you haven't seen this anime, but he is a really cool character. Lastly is Set. He is the prince Nina ends up getting engaged to. At first, he just seems like some psychotic murderer who is incapable of feeling love, but then we really jump into his character and we learn a lot more about him and why he is the way he is. It really does a great job at making you like him after all the bad stuff we've seen him do. He has some really great character development, but he still has a long way to go before he can be really truly ready for that kind of romance really. His relationship with Nina definitely is a little bit rocky, but they also end up growing closer together as time goes on. It's cool to see this because it actually makes it really hard to know which of these two is going to be endgame for Nina by the end of the anime, which is awesome. But that was Nina the Starry Bride, a pretty solid anime if I do say so myself. So the next anime on this list is one that I have to specify as anime only. I'm not talking about the manga in any way, shape, or form. This is anime only. Now to get to the show. It is Usagi Drop, and after hearing the name, it's an if you know type situation. The anime is great. It is super wholesome. It is about a guy who takes in his 6-year-old aunt after his grandfather passes away, and is a really lovely anime where a guy grows and learns to take care of her like he is her father. It is a really sweet series, and it is unfortunate what the manga did to this. Seeing how these two grow closer and just how sweet and loving they are is really awesome, and it really warms your heart to see it because both of them have issues that they are fighting through together, and it is nice to see them help each other out. This show honestly still looks pretty good by today's standards. It's not over the top quality, but it's definitely a show that you can still sit down and enjoy. The character writing is really where this anime shines through. The main character Daikichi is a guy struggling to come to terms with having to raise his aunt, but slowly he comes to love her presence, unfortunately a little too much, but that's not in the anime thankfully. He is someone who stepped up on the plate when really nobody else would, and despite everything, you have to respect that. Rin is a 6-year-old little girl who just had her whole life uprooted out when her father, an old man, just dies. Now she is forced to live with her nephew, who is a whole hell of a lot older than her, and is basically a complete stranger. She starts off not being very trusting or open about anything, but once she sees how much he is really trying, she does as well, and it is very sweet to see this development. There are some other characters in the story that are great as well. Some of them make the ending even more disappointing. We have Yukari and Koki. Both of them are friends of Rin and Daikichi and help them out whenever they can, and that is the disappointing part again. If you know, you know. But, this was the perfect setup for both of the characters, and they just decided to ignore it, but hey, it is what it is. Both of them are still great friends who help each other out, however. Honestly, this anime is great, and I highly recommend it. Just don't read the manga if you don't want it ruined for you. So the next one up is a personal favorite of mine, but I know a lot of people have probably never even heard of it before, and it's called The Raven of the Inner Palace. This anime is great for so many reasons, but let's get to the story. This is a mystery anime, actually somewhat similar to early Apothecary Diaries, just not quite the same. This is all about supernatural things happening in the palace and our Raven having to solve those issues. The aesthetics of this anime are great. It is gorgeous to look at, and the animation is pretty good from what I remember, but once again, the characters are the ones that steal the show here. There's quite a few characters that I really liked, especially our main two characters. So speaking of our Raven main character, Jusetsu is awesome. She is someone who has lived a very isolated life, being stuck in the little corner of her palace and her whole life and being raised to never really desire anything. That is, until she meets the Emperor, who flips her life upside down. She used to just sit in her palace and occasionally solve issues for people, but now she is forming bonds, solving mysteries because she wants to, and she also has more free time to travel to other places in the palace. Seeing this develop the way it did is awesome. Her supernatural abilities also make her unique and makes the mystery solving aspect way more interesting. Koshun, or the Emperor, is the first person we see come to Jusetsu for a request in the show, and he is the person who helps her come out of her shell a little bit. He is pretty clever and knows her circumstances. He pushes her, but not in a bad way. He is also quite strong in his own right, even if he has no abilities like Jusetsu does. He is an interesting character, especially with how he keeps putting himself closer and closer to Jusetsu with each passing episode. His own issues come back to bite him a lot in this show, which is also quite an interesting thing for sure. This was a small section, but not because the anime is bad, because I promise you, it's not. If you love the Apothecary Diaries, check this one out, it's pretty good. Not anywhere near the same level, but it's still pretty good. So next up is a little known anime called Chihayafuru. This anime is incredible for so many reasons, like where do I even begin? First, let's talk about the story. This is the story of a girl who falls in love with the game of Karata, and also someone else, but that's not important. The main focus is on the game of Karata. Her love for this game stemmed from her childhood, where she discovered this game after saving the male lead from a bully. This story is so good because of all its emotional depth and maturity. The anime looks incredible too. The character designs are awesome and the animation is pretty good. Honestly, I don't even think it looks bad if we compare it to today's standards. I just want another season of this anime because it is peak. But the best part of this anime is once again the characters. There are a lot of great characters, but the main three are such phenomenal characters, especially one of them, who I think has one of the best character arcs in the anime for sure. But let's not get to that right now. Let's talk about the main character, Chihaya. She is such an upbeat and bubbly character. She has her struggles not only with the game, but in life. She struggles with the loss of her friend. She has a lot of problems that stem from her childhood. Arta is Chihaya's childhood friend. He is a Karata prodigy. He is the one who introduced Chihaya to the Karata, and he is also her first love. He is the boy she saved from a bully when they were kids. He moved away when they were little, and she hasn't seen much of him, well, until this series starts, that is. But she struggles to deal with how he treats her and how he reacts to things. He's a very stoic guy. He doesn't show much emotion and is just locked in on the game constantly. But he does still care for Chihaya. He is just an idiot and doesn't really know how to express that, but that is where most of his character arc comes from. The last character I want to talk about is the childhood bully in question, Taichi. His glow up needs to be studied, not his physical appearance mind you, just in his behavior. Like I said, he was the childhood bully, but that is not the case anymore. No, far from it. He is now a kind-hearted guy who is a phenomenal leader and is someone who everyone can rely on. He gives great advice, but he does sacrifice himself a lot for the sake of his friends, and that is the biggest problem. He struggles with doing what he thinks is right and with helping himself as well. It's always awesome to see when someone grows and matures as a person when they really know they messed up. He is a phenomenal character and is actually like the best character in the entire series. But yeah, that is Chihayafuru. So my all-time favorite Josei anime is an anime called Rakugo Shinju. This show is incredible for so many reasons. First off, the story. This is a story about Rakugo, but not in the way that Akane Banashi does it. It is a very heavy show with a lot of drama and emotions. The first season is just the backstory of the master, and boy does it hit extremely hard. His entire story from when he was a boy to where he is now is rough to sit through. He lost a lot of people along the way, most of which was his fault, but some were just unfortunate accidents. Getting to see this story sets up so much of why a very specific name is completely taboo for a while. I love how the romance in this story goes as well. We see just how no matter how much you love someone, sometimes it is just not meant to be, and that hits really hard in this story. There are some very heavy themes in this, like essay and even a little bit of like incesty stuff, but not in the bad way like we normally see done in anime. This is done in a very mature way that makes the characters even more compelling, and the Rakugo is cool to see. I think in terms of portraying Rakugo as a medium, Akane Banashi does a better job, but that is because that is the point of the story, whereas Rakugo Shinju is more of a story of life, growth, and regrets than Rakugo. But the way they portray how the old structure of Rakugo worked and how it was really hard for people to just move up the ranks and that there was actually a reason why things were done is great. It shows off the cultural aspect of Rakugo better than any anime I've ever seen. This anime is also gorgeous. There are so many great scenes in this show that stand out. Honestly, everything about it is great. But let's finally talk about the characters because my god are the characters in this series amazing. Alright, first off, let's talk about Yakumo. He is such a cool character, literally. He has a bit of a troubled past. A lot of it is caused by decisions he made. He has also lost a lot of people. Despite all of his success, his life was not easy. He always had to deal with being less talented than his best friend, and he couldn't even snag the ladies as well as him. But that's all fine, as he focused more on his Rakugo success than anything else. He did have a lover, but he has more focus on Rakugo, and even her love couldn't persuade him. Alright, next up is Yotaro. He is the apprentice of Yakumo and an ex-convict who was trying to find his place in the world after getting out, where he met Yakugo in prison and fell in love with Rakugo, so he decided to give it a shot. He has this very fiery personality that works really well to contrast Yakumo, but also is a parallel to what eventually succeeds. Speaking of that person, next up is Sukeroku. He is Yakumo's greatest rival and friend, and just like with Yotaro, he has a very fiery personality, but he does eventually mellow out a bit as he grows older, especially after he becomes a father. He's had a lot of success as a Rakugo performer, but never quite made it all the way up to the top. He had a pretty tragic life that led him to his unfortunate downfall. But he tried to never let life get him down, and that is pretty cool. The last character I want to talk about is Konatsu. She is the daughter of Sukeroku and the eventual wife of Yotaro. She is an amazing character. She has gone through so much in her life, but she never really once let that get her down. I guess she got that from her father. She is a very strong-willed woman who doesn't take shit from anyone. She also has quite the talent for Rakugo. There is one moment in the story involving her that might not be easy to watch develop if you aren't fully prepared for it, but her character is incredible in so many ways, especially after having overcome so much. Alright, that was my list. All of these shows are great in their own right. Some of them I wouldn't normally put on a list like this, but with my lack of Josei knowledge, unfortunately, they had to be included. But none of these anime are bad, and I do highly recommend all of them, especially Chihayafuru and Rakugo Shinju. But anyway, that was the video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps out a ton, and if you do decide to join the community, then I guess I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!